So glad you could join me for another bonus episode of the Upland Nation podcast. Scott Linden here. Yeah, these bonus episodes are in large part, at least this time of year, going to be devoted to helping you find new places to go. Suggestions on destinations, whether it's a long weekend or your big trip of the year, or, well, for some of you, maybe just an afternoon down the road. But there's always new places to go, and there are always places that I've been that you might not have been, and vice versa. And let me encourage you now to think about making some suggestions for me. I'm free and easy this season, so I'm looking for places to go. You know how to reach me via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email. You got it. Send me some suggestions. And maybe we can talk about them next year on these bonus episodes. So if you're ready, let's go on another road trip. This one really interesting for a bunch of reasons. A blizzard, a tornado, and an earthquake. Yeah. So that'll be the topic coming up in just a moment on this bonus episode of the Upland Nation podcast, made possible by HiViz Shooting Systems, ESPAmerica, LandTrust.com, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Midway USA.com, Trulock Tubes, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, Pointer Shotguns, and Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products. Yeah, we were booked to go out and do a couple TV episodes in western Kansas. Another one of my favorite places, been there a lot. In fact, hoping to touch that state's border again this year. We were out there for the Governor's Invitational Pheasant Hunt, but we got to spend a lot more free time there as well, and that's what I'm going to talk about. If you ever get a chance to go to the Invitational, do it. It's a lot of fun. If you've been to Pheasant Fest, consider it an in-field version of that. You're basically hunting lots of landowners' private access, much of it on the walk-in program, but a lot of it just saved up for that event. And you never know who you'll be hunting with. You're on teams and you rotate around, and so does the event once in a while. It changes from town to town, but Western Kansas, if you're not aware of the resources out there, and the state in general, you'll learn by the end of this, as we visit 3 different places, you'll learn why I like Kansas so much. The first is pretty easy. 1.5 million acres of publicly accessible hunting land, most of it in the what they call WIHA, W-I-H-A, walk-in hunting access. And it's very well managed. I had the pleasure a few years ago of hunting with Wes Sowards of the Department of Wildlife Parks and Tourism. And he manages that program for them and showed me a lot of the stuff. But we also learned a lot about why it works so well. They actually do a little bit of quality control. And in addition, they also, patrol it a little bit. Not like a private landowner would, but on top of everything else, that's one of the benefits to the landowners is everybody's taking care of everybody out there on that walk-in ground, and it really pays off. Of course, walk-in hunting access is worthless if you don't know how to find it. They've got a pretty sophisticated digital version of their hunting atlas. They also have hard copies. Maybe you've picked those up once in a while, a big thick book. That is also an app now, so you can take a look at your phone and find country nearby that is open to hunt and drive to it. It's fun. It's simple. If I can do it, anybody can do it. On top of that, though, some other things going for Kansas. I know I sound like a tourist agency, but, you're looking for places that have high potential. And so am I. Especially when we're making TV shows. We got to find birds. That's why we go there. And in western Kansas, there's pheasants, there's bobwhites, There's even some greater prairie chickens in a few areas. Not very many. I don't think I'd go all the way to Kansas just for that unless it was a bucket list trip. Another thing I like, being an inherent cheapskate, you buy a license, it's good for 12 full months. And I've done this. I've been there later in the season, come back early in the season on the same license the next year. That I like. And it's not so bad, 150 or thereabouts. The bag limit for pheasants, 4 a day. Yeah, one more good reason. And then it's a little further south in those notorious pheasant states, so the weather is better. Starts a little later. The season starts usually the first or second Saturday in November. But the weather is better, generally speaking, later in the season than South Dakota or North Dakota, even Montana. All right. Well, that's the end of the Chamber of Commerce pitch. If you're lucky, you won't get hit with all the things that we followed on. Yeah, like I said, the week before we went, all 3 of those things hit western Kansas. An earthquake, not a bad one. Not California caliber. A tornado, and a blizzard. So we had lots to talk about with the locals when we got there, among other things, besides talking about the birds. Incredible place, variety of habitats. But enough about that. Let's go hunting. So the biggest challenge we thought was, how did everybody cope with all that? Are they okay? Are we going to be able to help out the cause in some way? Is that what we're going to be doing instead of hunting? Nope, they did just fine. These folks are hardy, hard-working folks. Western Kansas is not the stuff of TV shows, well, unless it's kind of like mine at least. There's no big urban areas per se. There's no major industry outside of agriculture. There are some great college towns and some incredible people, and that's what makes Western Kansas tick. There's a diversity of bird habitat. It's managed carefully. I've alluded to that already. From walking areas, there's some state ground, there's a little federal ground, there's a lot of reservoirs and private ground. And much of that is managed slightly better than a lot of other states that offer some sort of walk-in or public access program. I could go on and on about the resilience of the people in Kansas, but Friedrich Nietzsche said it best, I think. He said, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger." Well, they were stronger already by the time we got there a week after that 1, 2, 3 punch of natural disasters. And we had a heck of a good time. The first day of our freelance trip, we were down near Goodland, Kansas. Goodland is, if I recall correctly, that's becoming the default headquarters for the governor's invitational hunt too. But we were there just for fun. And it struck me first off that there was so much good cover still standing after that blizzard. We covered a lot of kind of grand slam habitat types, tall CRP grasses, thick. The dogs had a heck of a time getting through it. I had a young Manny when I was there, my wire hair Manny, and he just didn't quite know how to cope with this. It was jungle-like, but it was that, tall, head-high grass, so it's hard to beat your way through. The ringnecks sure liked it after the blizzard, or during the blizzard too, I would guess. But the interesting part was just across the road, of course, cut corn with shelter belts, fence rows, remember those? And just down the road, snow-covered, drifty, kind of unapproachable cut ground. It was really interesting to see the juxtaposition in such close proximity to each other. I remember one spot, we were driving down the road and we said, yeah, both sides. Well, wait a minute. One side was basically snow-free. The other side looked like somebody had basically taken their snowblower on that side I just described and put it all on the other side. That's Mother Nature for you. Microbursts or whatever. I don't know how that works. Never will. But when we got to that spot, I imagine you know which side we chose. We were hunting stubble. In this case, corn stubble. There's a lot more corn in Kansas than you think. And it would, drop down. You'd go over the side of a low hill, and at the bottom would be kind of a swale. A gentle draw, gentle compared to some of the places I go for chuckers. And in the bottom of that would be low-growing grass, maybe spots that were wet when there was a lot of rain or something like that. And what we found a lot of times was the birds were right at that edge. I know, it's obvious, but you don't even think about that. When there's so much corn on the ground in that stubble field, why would you go? Well, because they only need to eat a little bit once in a while. And there's a lot of that territory near Goodland. So if you're looking for a destination in western Kansas, Goodland, Kansas, it's got a lot going for it. And I believe that is the spot. There's a giant, they call it the Sunflower State. In Goodland, I'm pretty sure there's a giant, I don't even think I'd call it a sculpture, but it's tall. It's probably 50, 80 feet tall. We got some great drone shots with it. An easel, like a painting easel, with a picture of course, of Van Gogh's sunflower painting. Beautiful. And we did find some sunflowers. Yeah, it's a cash crop there. Anyway, the birds were on the edges, but then later in the day, they'd go deeper into those swales because there was no reason not to. They had plenty of food nearby. All they needed was protection from predators. And, some days, not that time of year, but some days a little bit of shade helped them a lot, very much so. That was a fascinating hunt for a whole bunch of reasons. I'll just tell you one story. Manny, he was, like I said, he was very young at that point. So he finally glommed onto what we figured out later was old scent. So he was basically trailing or tracking with his nose to the ground, going up the slope out of that swale towards the cut corn again, but very slowly back and forth, trying to follow that, foot scent. Couple false points, nothing there. We put a blocker at the top, the uphill end of that swale, and just followed Manny as he trailed his way up that swale a little bit more, going over to the edge a little bit, back up the other side, kind of this big bowl. That's when we got the real point. Yeah, after a couple meadowlarks, another track, solid point, only when one of our friends had skirted around that bowl, put himself up at the uphill, the highest point. That's what stopped the pheasant. Pow, pow. 2 shots, 2 guns. Ring neck dropped in the cut corn. Running as fast faster than a dog. But Manny finally caught him as he was coming back. You know what I'm going to say next? He pointed with a pheasant in his mouth. Well, when the bird flew, of course, he dropped the pheasant and started chasing the flying one, which we never got a shot at. But all was well. He came back. That bird was pretty much gone by then, so we didn't even need to worry about it. But he had really showed his nose sense S-E-N-S-E, knows sense, on those scents, S-C-E-N-T-S. Whew. You know your dog's happy when he looks at you with those wide eyes and his tail is just going like a metronome. Oh, man, that was something else. Oh, hair is standing up on the back of my neck just telling you about that story. And that story came from Goodland, Kansas. So put that on your short list. Yeah, incredible. Hey, I got 2 more days of hunting down there. And so I'll be talking about those in just a minute, including, let's see, where are we going next? Osborne, Kansas is our next stop. But before we do, let me remind you that we are made possible in part by Sage and Breaker gun care products. They've got a little of everything. Incredible, I'll call it hardware. Yes, tools for taking care of your gun, but also all the things that you carry and use to work on your gun. Gun cases, cleaning mats, that sort of thing. And also all those consumables that you're going to use up once the season starts. Firearms grease, cleaning, lubricating, and protecting spray-on. All those things available at sageandbreaker.com. Yeah, sign up for their mailing list. That way you'll get in on their very rare sales and also the new product announcements. It's all at sageandbreaker.com. Day 2, we headed on down to Osborne, Kansas. I'd never heard of the place, but that was one of Wes Soward's suggestions. Wes, of course, knows the walk-in hunting access program extremely well. He runs it, and he was pretty proud of the work they'd done out there. I understand why. When we made an episode out there, all we did was drive past walk-in hunting signs, going all the way out to that spot. We passed signs out that spot, all over the outskirts of town. You didn't have to drive very far. Osborne's a cute little town, little of everything. When we were there, the mayor was the local bicycle mechanic. Yeah, and very hospitable folks. Had a great time in town, but we were there for the hunting. So let's get to it. Our first stop on our hunt that day was straight out of one of those Terry Redland paintings. That incredible light that Terry knows how to use so well. Old homestead, backlit by the rising sun. The problem was we walked all around that place and didn't find a bird. Got some great video, got some great pictures. One of those old windmills. Some of the vanes on the windmill. Do you call it a propeller? I think you do. Twisted from the blizzard the week before, or the year, or the decade, or the century before, maybe. I don't know. A lot of the crops crushed by the snow. Pickings were pretty slim over there. But as we headed out farther from town, we stopped at a big unharvested sunflower field. We had permission. It was a walk-in place. I'd never seen that many sunflowers. And they're not quite the same as, if you've never been to a big sunflower operation, it doesn't look quite the same as the ones in your garden, for example. They're generally a little shorter. They're generally a little, by the time you get there in hunting season, they're pretty ugly. They're just drab, They've gone to seed, literally. There are no flowers left. But all those seed heads where the flowers are, yeah, full of the stuff like you could buy at the 7-Eleven store. The reason we were able to walk through the field is because we were hunting with one of the landowner's sons who knew that place like the back of his hand and knows when the ringnecks are in the sunflowers. Yeah, they don't all stick in the seed head. Some of them fall off, and guess who's going after those? About midday. So we put all our forces, 2 or 3 hunters, 4 or 5 of the landowner's Labradors in the field, and then the landowner's son and his buddy blocked at the other end of that field. So we walked that sunflower field for, I don't know, a quarter mile before the first bird got up. And once the first bird got up, all the birds got up. I don't know if they sent a memo to each other or what. They safety in numbers, whatever it was. But birds were getting up left and right, always just out of range on one side or the other. One of our hunters that day was brand new to pheasant hunting, and she was overwhelmed. And I don't blame her. I've been in that situation. I've been in that situation before myself. I remember a day in North Dakota with a wave of ringnecks coming my way at the top of a shelter belt, for example. Eventually, we must have hit the mother lode, the smack dab nucleus of that bunch of birds, because they were getting up in the middle. So even if they got a ways to one side or the other, there was somebody there that could hit them. And she did. She hit one bird. It flew 50, 60 yards, dropped. One of the labs brought it back. She was almost in tears. She'd been so frustrated with all those birds out of range until just then. Good on you. I'm glad we were able to help you enjoy your first pheasant hunt. I hope you're still doing it. Thank you for letting us be a part of that situation with you. Yeah, it was incredible. Sunflowers, if you ever get the chance, hunt near the sunflowers. Hunt in them if you're allowed. Just walk carefully. Incredible situation near Osborne, Kansas. As I said, a lot of those shots were hard crossers. Kind of cool, though, because even before you could see them, you could see the sunflower stalks rattling a little bit in the distance. It's a special kind of hunting that most people don't get to experience. So if you can, do that. That one near Osborne, Kansas. You're listening to a bonus edition of the Upland Nation podcast, by the way. I'm Scott Linden. These are the bonuses that help you consider going somewhere new and different. And one of those places is Atwood, Kansas. They don't have quite as much walk-in access there, but this experience was so good that if you do your homework, research carefully what there is there, you might find somewhere to go. And if you do, maybe you'll get lucky like we did. Here was an organic weed operation. And it was classic in so many ways. I use the term dirty farming because I think that's a colloquialism for a lot of folks in a good way. Of course, it's organic, so there's no artificial fertilizers or pesticides. But there are also a lot of those classic attributes from the old days. Shelter belts, ditch rows that are overgrown, fence rows that are overgrown. Yeah, just not the, edge-to-edge farming that we see everywhere else. Now, granted, this guy, in part, managed his ground for his own hunting as much as for the wheat that he was able to harvest from it. But those are the kind of golden opportunities that if you ever get the chance, you better jump on. Pardon the pun, it was a perfect storm of habitat types, cut wheat, soybeans, a big grassy hollow in the middle. And then on the right side as you're walking up that hollow is all that stuff, that classic boneyard, junkyard kind of a place that, well, you've seen pictures on my social media of some of those places, and this one was full of them. It was the full meal deal, literally, for ringnecks. Strategically conceived and managed by a local who was as concerned about wild birds as market prices for his grains. So we walked up that with an old short hair from one of our friends who kind of tottered up the swale, stopped here, hen flush. She tottered up the next side, nothing. She didn't move very fast, but she was pretty thorough. A few hundred yards up the hill, she pointed again, and this time, out of that waist-high grass, came a rooster. Well, that's when the young Wiesla at the far end of the group figured out what we were doing and got a little bit more excited. So now we had two good dogs working the field, one slow and methodical and one just, you know what I mean, bat blank crazy. But that's also fun to see. You know, if you ever get the chance, hunt with somebody else's young dog. Her tail was vibrating to beat the band. You know, dog is happy when you can't make out more than a blur on that end of a dog. So they were snuffling around in the clumps of bunch grass, that high stuff. The Wiesla finally figured out that, oh, okay, I get it. We're here to smell things that might be fun to catch. So we saw a few roosters within gun range because that young dog was, didn't know anything about managing its own range yet. But that was fine too. We'd seen a few roosters and got a couple shots, and that was good. As we got to the top of that draw, we reached a long row of cedars. Back there, they're cedars. We call them junipers out here. They're related. It was maybe a, third of a mile. So we swung hard to the downwind side and hunted it both sides. Two hunters on both sides, dogs ideally running through there. Sometimes they ventured a little to one side or the other. Hard to keep a couple pointing dogs in tight in a cedar shelter belt that's only maybe 15 yards wide at its widest. Well, when you're walking the sides of it, you can see the end of that shelter belt, and you can watch the birds just kind of sneak out and start running or break their concentration and fly away. Always at the end. We hadn't figured out that's where we should have put the blocker. You learn things, and that was one that from now on I promised I will do, so I have more stories for you. But as we walked that shelter belt, some birds were squirting out a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and eventually we'd get a shot here and a shot there, almost in gun range. But the biggest excitement for me, at least, was when this massive, I think it was a barn owl. I think they're light colored. They might even be white. I'm not sure. Flies out right in front of me. And they're not the biggest owls in the world, but this thing, first off, they're silent. So you only know they're there when they fly in front of you and freak you out. And he almost knocked my hat over. He was so close. Then I figured out that's why the birds were all at the other end. I don't know that an owl will prey on a ringneck pheasant, but the pheasants may not know that. They were sticking close to the cover the whole time. At the end of the push, we did have one slow learner of a rooster that got out within gun range, and it was pretty fun. The old short hair, she got a retrieve. Everybody enjoyed it. Pictures all around. I'll try and put one of those up, and just to remind me as well as you. Yeah, that is 3 different scenarios from western Kansas that might get you to start looking about that. It was a hunt for the ages. You know, you think about coming in after all of that. Blizzard, tornado, earthquake. Everybody was still good. Everybody was happy. Not many real serious problems to come from all of those, knock wood. And like I said, probably one of the most resilient populations I've ever run into. I keep coming back to this one because it fits so well, especially with our last hunt on that trip. There's an author that maybe you've heard of, but I didn't until I started looking up quotes from a magazine story I was writing. Masanobu Fukuoka said, "The ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings." Well, Kansas is probably the picture in the dictionary definition of what Fukuoka said. He was right on there. If you want to learn more about hunting in Kansas, I got a whole bunch more stories at findbirdhuntingspots.com. Go there, and hey, and while you're there, do me a favor. Go to the More tab at the top of the page, then down to the Wing Shooting USA page. Look at all the places you can now watch a new season of encore episodes of the TV show. Yeah, local stations, 6 regional sports networks, a whole bunch of streaming online app, video on demand, and regularly scheduled cable TV networks. It's all right there. Tell your friends. Get another fix of Wing Shooting USA, the TV show. Hey, thanks to all our sponsors for being a part of this, Sage and Breaker in particular for taking care of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you got your own stories or you have other suggestions for these bonus episodes, I sure appreciate them. Contact me through the social media. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of the Upland Nation Podcast.